Welcome to Libertas Europae. A lot of people these days talk about sustainability. That's one of the big issues of our day. And in all these discussions, it's always implicitly assumed that sustainability is obviously good and proper. Well, I want to offer a counter voice here. Yes, there certainly is some sort of case for sustainability, but it's not obviously good. There are very major downsides to sustainability. And sustainability is quite obviously quite contrary to the way we live our modern lives. We consume fossil fuels at a rate immeasurably greater than the rate at which they are generated. We pollute the air, we pollute our rivers and our oceans. We constantly keep reorganizing our societies. If you look at the big picture, our way of life has changed a lot more over the last 200 years than over the previous 2,000 years combined. And that's a great thing. Primitive societies might have been sustainable, but they were also wretchedly poor. Life in pre-industrial society for the vast majority of people was nasty, brutish and short. And only people blinded by romantic idealism want to return to such conditions. The average person in such societies lived on less than $3 a day per person adjusted for purchasing power. That is wretchedly poor. But these societies were more or less sustainable. Little about them changed for centuries, in some cases millennia. Now, sure, there were political changes. One group of people might conquer a particular area, a particular empire might rise or fall, but the way most people, for most of history, lived was just as subsistence farmers. And that didn't really change for many millennia. And that was just the state of civilized society for thousands of years. There were a few wealthy kings and lords who lived lives of relative luxury, but the vast majority of people were desperately poor. So if you want sustainability, this is the kind of life you can look forward to. And it gets even worse than that, because we cannot just return to these primitive conditions, because our population density is too high. We need industrial methods, we need fossil fuels, we need factories that produce pollution. We need all those things to actually be able to feed such great multitudes. Before the Industrial Revolution, humanity was caught in what economists call the Malthusian trap. That refers to the work of Thomas Malthus, a British economist, who proposed that while population rises exponentially, food production rises at most linearly. So population growth always eventually catches up to food production, and then you get some sort of catastrophe. So unless population growth is curbed by war or pestilence or some sort of great natural disaster, eventually you're just going to run out of food, and then you have a famine, people die off, and then the remaining people once again have enough to eat, and then their numbers rise again, and then you get another famine. So you get these cycles of plenty and misery. So on the whole, any sort of technological economic advance that humans make is eventually just going to be absorbed by greater population. So even if the economy grows, you're just going to have a bigger population, and the majority of people are still going to be desperately poor most of the time. This is what a sustainable economy looks like. So if you want to go back to that, not only would we have to live on $3 a day, we'd also first have to somehow get rid of all this excess population. We'd have to have some sort of great war or epidemic or some other sort of major catastrophe that kills off billions of people before we could actually go back to some sort of sustainable living in accord with nature or whatever. This whole idea that we should live sustainably, that is the idea that we should live in a way that we can just keep doing what we're doing indefinitely, is nonsense. Because in our industrial world, things just keep changing so quickly. People in the 19th century were worried that the rising rates of horse ownership and the rising size of cities would lead to cities being drowned in horse manure. And yes, if trends had continued indefinitely, that would have happened. That would have been a really bad problem. But it didn't happen because we stopped using horses, at least extensively. And yes, eventually humanity is going to run out of oil, such that at some point it's no longer going to be economical to use oil except for the most urgent purposes. But by the time that happens, I'm willing to bet humanity will have invented something better. We already have alternative technologies for at least some uses of oil, and we're going to keep discovering new ones. It's certainly worth worrying about the short and medium-term impact on the environment, to stop things like smog, which in Europe and America we've successfully done. In places like China, that's still very much an ongoing issue. I've talked in my previous video about the issue of climate change. It's linked up here if you want to look at that. Basically, the TLDW of that is climate change is real, it's an issue, but it's not a catastrophe. We're gonna get through it. What's important is that we look at these environmental issues through an economic lens. We need to look at the costs and the benefits of various proposed economic policies. And we need to only implement those environmental measures that pass this cost-benefit test, rather than just dogmatically declaring an ideological commitment to sustainability. And we cannot expect to be able to solve today the problems that humanity is going to face in 100 years or 200 years from now. For example, a lot of these climate models model out these future costs and benefits up to 200 years in the future, which is just complete nonsense. No one has any idea what life is going to look like 200 years in the future. And trying today to solve the problems of the year 2219 is complete nonsense. To get a rough idea of just how absurd that is, just imagine doing it the other way around. Imagine what if the people in the year 1819 had tried to solve our problems that we face today. So 200 years ago, in the year 1819, Europe was still recovering from the Napoleonic Wars. The Industrial Revolution was just kicking up steam in Britain. The Middle East was dominated by the Ottoman Empire. China was still ruled by the Qing dynasty. Japan was an isolated backwater in which the ultra-conservative Tokugawa shogunate had halted almost all progress for the last 200 years. The United States added Alabama as their 22nd state. Large-scale colonization of Africa by the Europeans hadn't started yet. Most people around the world worked in agriculture, many of them as slaves or serfs, and a substantial number of people hadn't even become farmers yet because they still lived as hunter-gatherers. So which of today's problems would you want people of 1819 to work on? Would you want them to work on climate change? Maybe race relations? How about running out of oil? What, oil? You mean like olive oil or... Oh, you mean that black gooey stuff that's in the ground that no one seems to have much of a use for? You're running out of that stuff? You're worried about nuclear war? What's a nuclear war? A war of the core? What's that supposed to be? The point is, we have no idea what the future holds. Now, we can make some reasonable predictions about the next year, the next couple of years, maybe even the next 20, 30, 40 years. But beyond that, we really have no idea what's going to happen. And trying to predict what's going to happen 200 years in the future is completely wasted effort. We'd likely end up looking about as silly as the 19th century people who worried about cities drowning in horse manure. The only prediction about the year 2219 that I'm willing to make is that life on Earth in 200 years is going to be radically different from the way it is now. But if human civilization keeps progressing and we keep having all these technological and scientific innovations, all these economic innovations, then people in 200 years from now will be vastly richer than we are today. People in the future will be much better equipped, will be able to much better afford to make the necessary adjustments that they will have to make in the future because they're going to have all this amazing technology. So opposing sustainability does not mean selling out our great-grandchildren. As long as we keep creating, as long as we keep innovating, we'll give our great-grandchildren all the tools they will need to clean up any of the messes we make along the way. No, our current industrial civilization is not sustainable, and there's no feasible way of making it sustainable without killing billions of people along the way. We are currently engaged in a grand experiment of rapidly changing human living conditions. So far it's been a smashing success and has yielded improvements in the standard of living of ordinary people that 200 years ago no one would have dared dream of. And of course, this experiment is not without its risks. It's entirely possible that some sort of catastrophe brought about by our technology, maybe a nuclear war, maybe artificial intelligence gone rogue, or maybe something else entirely, will lead to a civilizational collapse. We are on a train heading into the unknown at 300 kilometers an hour, and there are no brakes on this train. We might crash at some point, but so far it's been one hell of a ride. We don't know where this train will take us, but we do know that if we slam on the brakes, it will lead to disaster. Sustainability is not an option. We have to keep going. And along the way, we've lifted billions of people out of poverty. Probably more people lived good, decent, and prosperous lives in the last 200 years than in all the ages previously. So even if at some point in the future there's going to be a collapse, the ride will have been worth it. Alright, thank you for watching. Coming up is a review and critique of Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs and Steel, one of the most popular, although I think severely flawed, explanations for the European miracle. So if you don't want to miss that, please subscribe to this channel and ring the little bell button. And in the meantime, you can look at some of these other videos from this channel. And until next time, goodbye.